I hope you people are liking the content in this Selenium WebDriver playlist. If you have any feedback, suggestion or comment, please let me know. I have loaded a website on this Chrome browser, and if you see here, we can see it has a logo. Then it has some images, and if you scroll down you can see some product listing as well, and we have some checkbox, then we have some slider, we have a search box, we have a search button, and if you see on the top we have some navigators as well. If you go to sign in page, we can see some text boxes like email and password. We have login button. On this text box we can perform typing, or on the login button we can perform clicking. So in any automation framework, before performing any action on a web element, we need to find the element. But before performing the action, we need to ensure that element must be visible on your web page. Visual means we can see it from our eyes. Like here we can see the email text box, we can see the login button, we can see this login header. So here I have a HTML page, and if I open this HTML page in a browser, then it shows one button named visual button. But if we inspect this page, then inside this body we can see there are two buttons. One button with the ID button 1 and text visual button, which we can see on this screen. But we have one more button with the ID button 2. But this button is not visible on this web page. And if you see the actual HTML code of it, I have used CSS property to control the visibility of this second button. I have a class hidden element for the second button, and if you see the CSS here, I am using a property called display with the value none to make it invisible on the browser. So we have multiple ways to set the visibility of the web element, like we can use the CSS, or we can use the JavaScript, or if we use any JavaScript based front-end frameworks like Angular or React, there might be some different methods to control the visibility of the web element. So summary of this HTML web page is that we have total two buttons. One button is visible but another button is not visible, and both the buttons are present in the DOM. Now let's see how my find element method behave with these two web elements. So let me load this HTML page in my script. So I will copy the path. I'm going to use the get method, chromedriver.get, pass the URL. I'm going to use button 1 first, which is the ID for the visual button. So let me use chromedriver.find element by .id and use button 1. And I'm going to close the browser. If I use the find elements method, then I need to print the size of the list. So let me quickly run this program and see what is happening. So you would have seen that browser was closed and we don't see any error message on the console. That means it was able to find the button with the ID button 1. That is obvious because that is present on my browser. Now let me use the second ID, which is button 2, and this button is not visible on my web page. So let me go and change the ID from button 1 to button 2 and rerun the program. This time also Chrome was closed and we don't see any error message on the console. That means find element method is able to find both the web elements perfectly fine. Find element does not care if the element is visible on the screen or not. It should be present on the DOM. That's why before performing any action on the web element, we need to make sure that element is perfectly visible on the browser's view part. Let me show you why. So suppose I'm going to store this element into a variable, so web element button 2, and before quitting the Chrome browser, I'm going to perform click on my web element. So for that I need to use the web element reference and call the click method. Let me run this program now and see what happens. So this time Chrome is not closed, and if I see the console, it gives me an exception and it says that element not interactable exception, element not interactable. Find element method is able to find the element but it cannot perform any click on it because element is not in the position to interact. So that is the reason we need to ensure that element is perfectly visible on the web page. So let's see what is the visibility of this web element. For that, we can use sysout and use the web element reference, and we have one method called isDisplayed. Let me comment the button 2.click statement, and I am going to just print the display status of both the buttons. So let me quickly duplicate these lines for button 1 as well and run the program. So Chrome is closed, and if you see the output for the button 1, it is returning true, and for the button 2, it is returning false. So this isDisplayed method will return you true if the wave element is present, or you can see that wave element in the view part of the browser, otherwise false. So this is the important check before you perform any action on the wave element. But this is not the sufficient. Let me show you why. I have another web page. On this web page also I have two buttons, and both the buttons are visible because I am using display CSS property with the value block. If you want to hide, then you can use the none. But the trick part here is that button 2 overlaps or hides button 1. If I open this web page in a browser, then we can see it is showing me button 1. So actually there is a mistake in this HTML. I am using two classes, button 1 and button 2. So here I need to use button 2, and here also I need to use button 2. And if I refresh this page, you can see now we see the button 2 on the top. So what is happening? This button 2 has overlapped the button 1. Button 1 is exactly behind this button 2, or we can say button 2 is on the top of button 1. Now let's see how this find element method behaves. So let me copy the path of my new HTML page and load it here. Let me inspect this web page and see which locator strategy we can use. So we are using class name this time with the button 1 and button 2. So let me copy these two lines and paste here, and instead of ID I am going to use class name. In the same statement we are going to write for button 2 as well. Let me run this program and see the output. So obviously we need to change the variable name, so let me correct it and rerun. Since I have not used the quit method, so it is not closing, that's fine. But if you see the output for both the buttons, it is giving me true, and that is fine because both the buttons are visible on this browser, but we cannot see it because button 2 has overlapped the button 1. But for Selenium or for this browser, both the buttons are loaded in the view part of this browser. So let's try to perform click on button 1. So let's use button 1 dot click, and let's see what happens. Let me rerun the program. If you see the console, we have an exception. Scroll up and now we see element click intercepted exception. Element button 1 is not clickable at point something. The only difference between these two examples are that in the first example, element was not visible in the browser view part, but here it's visible, we cannot see that. Now you might be thinking why someone will create the wave element like that. Means it will be overlap the another wave element. But this is a very common scenario. Let me tell you some scenarios. Suppose you open this login page, and we can see the email text box and password text box, but it opens a pop-up just right top of this with the like welcome message or some ads kind of thing. If that time if you try to perform any action on this text box, it will not work. It will give you some exceptions because the email text box will be hidden by the pop-up. So in those scenarios you need to wait for that pop-up to be disappear. Let me show you one more example. I have another web page. On this web page, one element is on the top, but another element will be in the bottom. But to see that web element, we need to scroll it. So let me open this HTML into a browser. So we can see this is the top element, but to see the bottom element, we need to scroll. So the view part of a browser will be the content, whatever we can see by scrolling as well. isDisplayed method on this element give you true, but there might be some possibility when you scroll, then only the remaining contents or the new content of the web page will be loaded. So in that case, if you call the isDisplayed method, it will give you false. So that's all in this video. If you have any doubt, please comment on this video. If you really like my videos, please like, comment, subscribe and share with others. Thank you everyone.